everybody, welcome back to the Dice Tower. My name is Zee Garcia.
I'm Camilla Claghorn.
Today we're taking a look at Monster Pit. Monster Pit here is a cooperative game, a solo game, an all versus one game, in which you are defending a town, a fantasy town, from invading beasties and baddies and all of that jazz. So you are going to be moving around the town. You're going to be visiting different locations. You're going to be taking the powers from those locations, hiring new people to help you, attacking the main baddie, trying to keep them from advancing on their sort of scary track, because if they get to the end of that, then you have all lost the game. All right, that's the idea. Let's go ahead and take a look at a quick overview here of just some of the general concepts, and we'll be right back. In the game, you'll either have all the players playing fully cooperative, or you'll have one player running the villain, which is this one right here. And so the villain, if you are not playing with someone playing as this character, will run itself. You will simply deal with all the information on it. You will make rolls for it and follow instructions as listed on the villain here. The villain is going to have another board here that denotes how many dice they are rolling. You will track that with these cubes right here. And then health that you are trying to bring down to 0. If you manage to do that, you will win the game. There's also then a token that goes around the board, and if that token moves all the way around and the villain makes it down to the end there, then the heroes will lose. So that's something else you are trying to avoid. That's how we lose. Defeating the villain is how we win. Every player is going to have one of these boards made up of 2 halves. They're going to have their character here, their captain, and then they all have one paladin to begin, as well as some information down here. These spots here can take cards. The ones on this half are for attacking, and the ones on that half are for defending. I'm going to give you just a quick overview and a brief look at the phases of the game. Every round is going to have 4 phases in it. The first one is the morning phase, where all the players, the captains, they're going to roll their dice pool, and they're going to gain gold and move the monster forward. Your dice pool is all the characters you have out here. So, for example, this one gives me a yellow die, and my own character down here gives me a yellow and a white. I'm going to roll these dice, and I am going to gain gold for each of these. These are the good dice symbols, and I'm going to move the monster for each of these monster symbols. So I would gain 2 gold, and that there's coins for that. So I would gain 2 gold there, and I would move the baddie 1 spot. Everyone does this. That's the morning phase. During the midday phase is the meat of the game. All the players are going to move their token onto the citadel spaces out here, the different districts, and take structure actions at the buildings there. If there was a monster player, they would draw some cards, but again, we're ignoring that. We're pretending we're playing full co-op, the game running the baddie. So what this means is I could move to a location, one of these locations, and I could take the actions of the buildings in that location. And next round, during the midday phase, I have to move. From here, I could move to another location and take the building actions in there. There are many of these buildings. I'm not going to be going over all of them. I will show you a couple of them, or a couple of the general ideas that tie to some of these buildings. So, for example, over here at these, you could buy those characters up there. They have a cost in gold. You would take them. If I buy this one, for instance, it's going to cost me 9 gold, and I'm going to deploy them. They tell you sometimes that they can only go on the attack or the defense. If they're both, you can put it wherever you want to. And then I have a new character with some new dice and a new ability. There's also mounts you can buy. There's equipment you can buy. Sometimes you can acquire a wizard or a dragon. You can get these tokens here that let you upgrade your dice. So I might be able to change my one of my dice to a better die. The red ones favor the monsters, the yellows are neutral, and the white ones favor us, the heroes. There's also combat in the game, which can happen at a couple of different locations on the board. You might be able to do it from out here in the entrance to the city. You might be able to do it from this building right here if you didn't do it over there. And there's also, if there's a monster on a building, you can put a circular disc on there, a little token that represents the monster. If you go to that district, you could also fight that monster at that building instead of taking the building action. Once we are done with that midday phase, then we go to the twilight phase, in which the monster is going to perform a twilight roll, and then we consult the monster board for the result of that. So as I said, we've got this board right here, which is going to show you how many dice the monster player is going to roll. And you keep track of this based on what the monster has available to them. This is really just a visual guide to help you know I need to roll 2 white dice, 4 yellow, and 1 red die. You would roll those, and then you consult this chart over here to know what happens with the monster. Special abilities are listed here. Down here in this corner, we've got the number of health based on the number of players. So 4 times the number of players, or if you're playing solitaire, then it's just 7 health there. And then based on how many monster rolls you get, that denotes what happens. So for example, if we get 3 of them, it says attack the lead captain. And then there's a symbol there as well to let you know some information. So this is the guide as to what the baddie does during that twilight phase. And then after that, we go on to the night phase, in which if there's any night phase effects, they're going to resolve. We're going to return any tavern cards, any stable cards. We cycle them and show a new one. The King's Messenger is going to move to the next player. This is the King's Messenger token, and there's a card that corresponds to that is going to move around the players. So we move this along just as a visual aid that player now has it. And we go on to the next round, starting with the morning phase again. And again, the objective is very simple. The monster wins if they get to the final track space here on the so-called vengeance track. And the captains win if we take the monster's health down to 0 by hitting them here and getting it all the way down there. If we do that, we win the entire thing. So there you go. That is a very quick and brief overview of the game. All right, so first and foremost here, Monster Pit is from Elzra, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen it mentioned that this is not a dexterity game. Everywhere, right. Like, that's the main thing it seems that they are explaining.
Because it's been compared to, or Elzra is known for catacombs,
yeah,
which is.
And so everywhere on the BGG page, literally the first line is, not what this is, but what this is not. This is not a dexterity game. It's probably in the rule book even. It's everywhere. And while I get that that's something they want to avoid, that thought in people's minds like, ooh, must be a dexterity game, I kind of wish they had focused more on what this game is. Because while I get that you are trying to differentiate yourself from catacombs, this game has, I think, a bit of an identity crisis and tries to be everything to everyone. And in fact, I'm kind of surprised it isn't also a dexterity game, because it tries to do so many different things.
Okay, I didn't necessarily have that feeling. I felt more like it does look like, and even to the components, look like they could go into catacombs as well. Sure. And so I think for me, I took it more as, hey guys, it's not part of catacombs. It's not an expansion. It has nothing to do with it. It's its own thing, you know? And so I think they were trying to, like you were saying, just create that understanding going in so people didn't have that expectation. Mm-hmm. I didn't necessarily feel the identity crisis of it necessarily.
Yeah, I think it tries to do a lot of things. Again, and this happens, when a game comes out, and I know that this one had a little sort of crowdfunding influence from some of what I've read online, with some of the last-minute rules changes that the designer talks about. Oh, yeah, that was something that somebody suggested at the last minute on wherever it was, Kickstarter, whatever, and we implemented that. Hand in hand with that, I found there to be some issues with the rule book because some of those things that ended up changing last minute weren't cleared in the rule book. And I found out because I saw the guy again online being like, oh yeah, we forgot to add that line and mention that. You should remove your own character from the stack of cards because you can't recruit yourself if you are playing in the game. We added that last minute.
Yeah. So
things like that add to that feeling of lack of specificity, I suppose, when it comes to this game. But let's go ahead and talk about things we liked for a little bit here. Mm-hmm. Then I'll come back around to some other things. So things we like. The look of this game, I know you're a big fan of.
I'm a real big fan. I think it has that kind of paper-crafted look to it almost, but still just feels dungeony scrapped together, I guess. I don't know. I'm a real big fan of the look of this and the way it kind of comes together in this again, paper scrapbook kind of world.
There's something childlike about this artwork, right? It kind of feels like a child's imagination made this. Obviously, it's not a child's level of skill.
Right.
The world feels dreamlike.
I was gonna use that exact word, dreamlike. This is the type of illustration I would think if you're showing me like a child's dream. You know, like in a movie and it shows like one of those cut scenes where you go to their dreams. This is what it would look like, I think, to me. And I like that a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so the look is very interesting. I thought the graphic design wasn't as good. I thought it could have been a little bit better. I still like some of the numbers and where and the backs of the decks and what they tie to with the number in the corner. I thought that was a little bit messy, and just some of the graphic design things I thought was messy, but I think the artwork is superb. As far as the gameplay goes, this idea of, you know, it's very, very much dice-driven. This idea of roll in the morning, take some gold, maybe advance the baddie, and then you get to move your character to a district and take some actions.
Right.
What did you think about that flow? Did you like that gameplay flow?
So I really liked that, actually. I think one complaint that I would have is I felt like there was too many actions on the board. You know, and trying to keep clear what does what and how to combo that together to go where I need this, where are the places I can go. That being said, I think that the player aid is fantastic and much needed. When I first opened the box up here and it's like, oh my gosh, an entire sheet of a two-sided sheet for a player aid. It seemed very like, this is ridiculous and over the top. And then you play, you're like, oh no, by the end of the game, I'm still reading all those locations. So I really like what it was doing and how each building feels a little bit different, but you find different combinations and synergies in the groupings of them, because when you go to a location, you do get to use all of the buildings in that location.
Right.
I really like that. So you're finding what combo works for what you need to accomplish that. I do just think that there's some of them that could have been combined together. Like if we just did without one whole of those sections and combined those into a different building, I think that would have been a little sweeter spot. There's a little too much going on in the buildings. But the flow of it, I was a real big fan of. I liked that, and I think it led to interesting conversations, you know, as it's like, I need to go over here. All right, well, I'll go with you because I can give you the extra gold so that you can maximize your options there, and you can really collaborate not just in what you all need to accomplish, but how you can do certain things together. And I thought that led to some interesting discussion and interesting worker placement.
Well, especially when you need to combine to buy the characters to hire people to help you out. They're very costly. And so, yeah, definitely traveling together and helping each other purchase those or, you know, hire those is a big deal. You need to fill out that tableau a little bit. Everything in this game, like you said, there are a lot of buildings, and I feel that way about a lot of it. There's a lot of things. That's normally not a negative for me, but in this game, everything feels a little too big and clumsy. I don't know how to describe that. Like the player board is two boards side by side. It's so big, it needs to be two. The central board is this big clunky thing with all these little spaces that you can put your disc at. The player aid is a big clunky two-sided thing, or clumsy, again, is kind of the word I'm using. I found it to be embiggened, like it almost had a spell cast on it that made it about 20% too big on everything. Everything's just a little too big for me. It's a huge table hog, too, so be aware of that. If you are playing with a higher player count, you're going to need a large surface.
Absolutely.
It's very, very large on the table, okay? For me, my main takeaway here is that I find the game, while interesting in concept, I think I found the execution to be very kind of sloppy, kind of clunky. I found the game had its moments. There's certainly interesting things to do, and the artwork does some serious heavy lifting here. The cute things, the cute little mounts you can hire and put under one of your characters, and now they're mounted on that character. That's their little steed. Very cute. And there's some interesting stuff that's happening for sure. I like the dice system and how incredibly straightforward that is. Very nice, exploding dice. Love it. But I found the game, the rules, the general flow to need some serious development. It just feels so clunky. It feels like many things could have been combined together, could have been streamlined, rules could have been tightened up. The whole thing is sort of this first edition, like first try, and every idea you had ended up in it, and you bring it to me and drop it on the table and go, look at what I made, and I would go, great. You can trim about 35% of this out, and this is going to be a punchy, fun, cooperative game with a wonderful look and an interesting, developing story, some nice rising tension. As it is now, my nose is stuck in the player aid on both sides. I'm looking up rules. I'm trying to understand things. All the buildings just sort of look alike after a while, so I found it to be, again, in one word, clunky.
I definitely feel like it's one of those games that kind of suffered from being on Kickstarter, and it feels like it has 2 or 3 modules included in the base game. Like the mounts, I felt like those were additional rules that didn't necessarily need to be there. That could have been a module once you know how to play and you know all the buildings.
Okay.
But trying to nail down all that stuff in the first play when it didn't necessarily feel necessary. Again, it felt like a module, and it felt like from right out of the gate, you're playing with every module possible that they shoved into here.
Okay.
And so it did feel a little bit, I think everything that was in it I did enjoy. I think that it would have just been better to add in at your leisure as you're comfortable with the game, or to manipulate the game as you have multiple plays. I will say one positive thing that I really like is I think that this game is going to, a lot of those issues are going to resolve themselves, and you'll be rewarded with multiple plays. I think as you get the buildings down, it does become quicker. It does really lean into that need for cooperation. And I think even after the first play of it, I was like, I see what I should have done differently. Sure. And this game left me thinking about it, wondering how I could have done differently, how I could have won, where I went wrong. It was just, I just kept thinking about it. And then I played it again, and the same thing happened. It was a little bit smoother that second time. And I was like, oh, I did better. But I still see, I didn't even think about that. This is why this building has to be here. So this is one that I think, while there is a lot going on, it's going to, the reward is there with the time and with the repeated plays. I think those things do smooth themselves out as you learn and kind of acclimate to the game. But unfortunately, that acclimation process is a pretty clunky first play.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to go first with my score, because your score is obviously going to be higher. I'm giving this one a 5. I think it's a very average game. I think it needs help. I think if you are particularly charmed by it and you want to stick with it, yes, eventually you'll climb that hurdle, and I think you can have some fun with this one. I doubt this is something I would play again. I find it, again, to be competing in an incredibly crowded field. It's fantasy, kind of generic, cooperative game. I can think of a dozen games that are one thing or the other, or both, that I think are better and more polished. So this is one I find very mediocre. Again, I'm going right down the middle here with a 5 for this one. And again, hopefully everything I've stated already is supporting that score.
I'm going to come in at a 7.5. This is one that I wouldn't just recommend. I would seek out play, and I do see myself seeking out additional plays of this. I think now I would not want to play it in a group again where nobody else knows the game. I would, and I'd be happy to teach, and I think because I would now be a better teacher of the game, having smoothed that out. But that heavy lifting I've already done. So, you know, if you're getting this game for the first time, just know, it's going to be rough that first time. Maybe do solo it that first time, because it is really easy to play at those lower player counts as well. And I do think it scales really well as well outside of the table hog. So 7.5, I not only really enjoyed it, I would seek it out. I do like and what I think it does really well and unique is your own little unique army that you're building, and the way you are comboing. You get one worker placement, but how can you get the right combo of actions where you go in the city? I felt that was unique. It was really refreshing and led to some great decisions and discussions, which is what I want out of a cooperative game. So for me, it really, I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to playing it more.
All right, there we go, folks. So that's a 7.5. That's a seal of approval for Monster Pit, and that's going to do it for us. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Zee Garcia.
I'm Camilla Cleghorn.
Watch out for the monsters.
Be careful.
Wow.